Chapter 3. Illusion Chachi at a lecture? Better be careful. Last time on Dojo at Football State, Damien and his lineage of Tanner and Gary, under the guidance of Abby, learned the ins and outs of brewing green tea. Marcus and his lineage of Natalie, Catherine, led by Jack, went to dinner and got attacked by a disgraced tea practitioner named Jeremy. Marcus, Natalie, and Catherine each took some heavy damage from his powerful Chachi before Jack intervened. He unveiled a mysterious teapot and his ability to compel his target to follow his commands. Before he was defeated, Jeremy gave a familiar warning to that of Ahmed, claiming that the tea dojo was a dangerous place. Damien furiously scribbled in his notebook. Sitting in the tea dojo, the room was mostly quiet as the kettles slowly were brought to a boil and other members prepared for the nightly lecture of the week. Marcus looked on at Damien, who sat across a table from Abby. There was a look of concern on his expression as he watched his roommate write things down like his life depended on it. Abby seemed to study carefully some papers strewn about on the table. After some time, Damien urgently brought his face up from his notebook. "Okay, let me get this straight," he said. "So all tea gets plucked and withered. Then green tea and white tea don't get oxidized, just pan-fried or steamed, respectively?" "Yeah, I wrote a footnote next to it that says, like dumplings. You should write that down too," Abby said. "Oh yeah, that's good. And then oolong is rolled, allowed to oxidize in a range of anywhere from like 8% to 80%. It all depends on when you roast it and how you roast it that determines the different types. And then red tea is..." Damien checked his watch. "Dang it, I have to run. I'm going to be late for my physics lab." Marcus shook his head. "How did you end up with an 8 p.m. physics lab?" "I made my college decision late and then I got to book classes late, so I got stuck with the nosebleed time. Now I have to miss every lecture at the dojo. Fortunately, Abby's giving me the spark notes before every lesson, so I'm basically getting the full thing." Abby did not respond because she was deep in thought staring at a page of her notes. She was trying to figure out why there was a cartoon doodle of a dog with a speech bubble that said, "Heh, did you know?" on it in the history section. Marcus raised his eyebrows and darted his eyes back and forth between the two. Damien continued. "Yeah, because otherwise, I would say I have the worst luck in the entire world." As he was walking out the door, he nearly collided with a small woman who seemed to shamble into the dojo. She was short, with light tan skin and black hair, which currently looked to be soaked, along with her clothes. She let out a big sigh, dropping her wet backpack onto the nearest chair and collapsing into the seat next to it. "Whoa, Danielle," Damien said. "Are you okay? You look drenched." Marcus peered out the small window near the top of the wall of the dojo. "Yeah, how did you manage that? It's not even raining outside." She heaved, trying to wring out the wetness from her hair. "There's been this rain cloud that's been personally following me around." Marcus raised his eyes. "There's been a rain cloud that's been personally following you around all day." Danielle shook her head. "No, not all day, since I got to campus and the beginning of the year, really. It's fine. It's less of a pain than the rabid dog who used to chase me around back home. Honestly, if you disregard that and me getting West Nile virus the first week of classes, this year's been actually going pretty well for Danielle so far." Damien looked sympathetically at her. Marcus just looked skeptical. "Well, that's good. Hopefully the upswing continues. I really got to be making my way to my lab." "Oh, please wait. Have a cup of tea before you go." A young Chinese woman appeared, placing a teacup in Damien's hand and one in each space before Marcus, Danielle, and Abby. For some reason, she was wearing one of those goofy, cheap-nosed glasses and mustache Halloween masks. Abby remained distracted, deciphering her notes, but the other three of them looked on suspiciously at her. Damien, who was running late at this point, simply threw back his cup, drinking it in one gulp, and made his way out the door. His hair lightly stood on the back of his neck, but at this point he was used to it. "Thanks for the tea. See you all later." Danielle quietly sipped a bit of the tea. Marcus smelled it, but watched the stranger cautiously. "And who are you again?" he said, pretty sure they had never met. "Oh, you don't know me?" she asked. "I'm Nadine. I just passed the tea practitioner's exam last year, but I'm pretty busy, so I don't come to the dojo much." "And the costume?" "Oh, this thing? I'm surprised you saw through my disguise. I'm actually a master of illusion, Chachi." "Are you now? Because to me you just look like a clown," Marcus said. Danielle sighed. "One time in high school, a clown stole my lunch money." Marcus took his eyes off Nadine for a moment to stare at Danielle. He looked to say something, but something briefly caught in his throat. He coughed a little. Instinctively, he grabbed for the tea and slurped it down. Instantly, he realized what he had done and noticed Nadine was smiling. Nothing about the tea tasted off, though, so he simply tried to shake it off. As Rick entered the dojo from the back room that adjoined it, Nadine slowly seemed to slink out of view, almost vanishing before Marcus's eyes. As Rick set up the slides for lecture, Damien struggled to keep his eyes open during his physics lab. The TA was still going over the instructions in a monotone voice as Damien slowly thought to himself, "Wow, I'm really zoning," he said. "This person won't notice if I close my eyes for just a minute, though." As he thought this, he slowly drifted off to sleep. He was suddenly awoken by the TA slamming her fist down onto the desk. "Excuse me," she said. "Am I boring you? Or would you like to start helping your partner?" Damien shot his head up and turned his body in the direction that the TA gestured swiftly. In doing so, he did not realize that he swung the sharpened pencil in his hand too, and stuck it right through the hand of the girl sitting next to him. She wailed and he looked on in shock. "Oh my gosh," he said. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Here, let me help." He reached out to grab her arm to bring her over to the sink to wash the wound out. When he did, though, he tripped slightly, yanking her to the ground. Her head clipped the desk as she went down and let out a brief yelp before going still and silent. Damien gasped, holding his hands over his mouth. "No, He turned to see everyone staring on at him in horror. The TA stepped back. A student grabbed his phone to call emergency services. The TA clicked her tongue. You killed her," she said. "What did she ever do to you? Why did you attack her like that?" "Attack her?" Damien asked. "It was an accident." Damien stepped forward as he explained himself. As he did so, the TA and all the other students jumped backwards in shock. Damien's face dropped even lower as he saw this reaction to him. He stared at the girl on the floor, blood slowly leaking out of her head. He held his hands to his face. The students started whispering to each other. Despite them being so far away, he heard all of their voices as if they were right next to him. "He killed her. What a monster." "No remorse. He will do it again." "Even his loved ones aren't safe from him." The words swirled around Damien's head as he writhed in agony. He was on the verge of dropping to his knees as the negative thoughts repeated louder and louder in his head. He was about to break when suddenly he heard a voice more distant and distinct than the others. "Get away from him!" Damien removed his hands from his eyes and suddenly noticed that swirling clouds of black mist seemed to be circling him. In this moment, he realized his neck hair had never gone down. The black clouds were suddenly forced back by an unseen force. Damien turned around to see Danielle, with 2 fingers to her head and a teacup that she was in the middle of slurping. A kettle and gaiwan brought all the way from the dojo lay at her feet. Once the clouds were pushed away, she seemed to use her telekinetic powers to lift the kettle up into the air and brew into a gaiwan in front of her. She poured out and served the tea. She grabbed one of the cups and got ready to toss it. "Here, Damien, catch!" She tossed it and Damien ducked as it nearly hit him in the face. It crashed into one of the ghosts that seemed to have taken the place of the students and TA, and shattered instantly. The one it hit seemed to let out a guttural cry and dissipate into the air as tea was spilled on it. Damien turned as his leg was grabbed by one of the specters, the one who had been masquerading as a murdered girl. Damien turned his attention back to Danielle. "Hey, I need another cup," he said. "But, this time maybe just float it over to me." Danielle nodded. She took a sip of the tea and then brought her fingers to her temple as she mentally manipulated a cup through the sky and into his hand. He took a sip. It was red tea. The sharp floral flavor of tea overtook him immediately. It was a fairly good brew for Danielle, who had only joined the dojo around the same time as him. There was almost a faint almondy chocolate undertone to it. Damien felt the fear instilled in him by these things slowly leave his body as he channeled the chachi. He poured the rest out onto the ghoul grabbing onto his leg as she melted away. He ran over to Danielle. The other specters seemed to swirl together into one large one. "Let's get out of here," Danielle said. "On it," Damien said. The two ran down the stairs of the physics building and in the direction of the dojo. Damien noticed how uncanny and unnatural everything on campus looked. The sky was red, despite it being dark. The lamplights, which were normally a warm glow, shined like headlights. The sidewalk was replaced with a jagged brick pattern. "What's going on here?" Damien asked. "We're in some sort of bizarro parallel world," Danielle said. "Everything's just a bit off, and there are these strange ghost things around." "How did you find this out?" "I dozed off in tea lecture, but when I woke up, I realized my toe no longer hurt from the hammer that was dropped on it the other day. Then I started spotting other weird things. The only thing that was normal was Marcus, who was just waking up as well." "Marcus is here too?" "Yeah, I was able to cue him in, and he started brewing to fight the specters. He said he was sure that you were here too, and that I needed to go help you." "How did he know you were here?" They were almost to the dojo when Damien started to scratch his chin. I think he might have just realized what I just realized. As they were running, Damien suddenly grabbed Danielle by the arm. Watch out! He yelled, yanking her back and out of the way. A dozen knives all flew in the direction of the two, narrowly missing them. Damien watched as they hit the ground and transformed into the specters that had previously attacked them. He turned his attention to the origin of the knives. Nadine sauntered over towards them, hand covering her laughter. Her eyes looked absolutely sadistic as she went in their direction. So, you figured it out, she said. That cup of tea was your ticket to my world, an illusory plane where my will becomes reality. Her eye twitched a little. There's just one thing I can't understand. You two boys got gripped by your own worst fears near immediately. Why on earth does she not get affected by any of this? She pointed a finger at Danielle. Danielle just crossed her arms and stared back at her. Well, you see, she said, I face my worst fears every day. There's nothing I fear anymore. Nothing that you can imagine for me, anyhow. A loud cry of pain emanated from the tea dojo. Damien turned in that direction. Marcus, he said, turning to Danielle. Give me the gaiwan. I'll take care of her. You go rescue him. She nodded and handed him the gaiwan and kettle and then ran off. Nadine eyed her, but after a moment just shrugged and focused her attention on Damien. She grabbed another knife from her pocket and transformed it into a gaiwan of her own. The grass by her feet became withered tea leaves, which she drew from the ground. She conjured her own kettle and began to brew. Let's see just how much gung fu you've learned in your time, runt. Damien brewed as well. He steadily poured over the leaves in a circular motion as 100 thoughts ran through his head at once. We have to assume Danielle brewed this tea at least twice, once at the dojo and once in the physics lab. Based on the fact it was a little underdone in the lab, and the fact that this is another brew with even more of the flavor compounds having been extracted already, it needs to be much longer. How much longer exactly? Well, I guess I'll have to rely on my nose to tell me that. He brought his face close to the gaiwan. He noticed how Nadine simply held her hand next to hers, not bringing her face anywhere near it. He had seen Abby and Ahmed do the same thing just a few weeks ago. Marcus also told him that Jack had used a teapot with a firmly situated lid, with no way to smell for an aroma peak. Damien greatly disliked feeling that there was some sort of knowledge disadvantage he had. For now, though, he just had to trust in the training that Abby had given him. When he sensed the flowery notes of the tea had reached their height, he poured out the gaiwan. The scattered ghastly spirits surrounding them turned into dark snakes and exchanged the dueling brewers' tea with one another. Damien tasted her tea. It was another red tea. In hers, he tasted stronger piney notes, whereas his had a less robust body, and by contrast, more tannins and bitter flavors. Fortunately, on a third brew such as this, those flavors had mostly mellowed out into a red wine aftertaste. Still, he was alarmed that she had clearly conjured a tea of higher quality than the facsimile Danielle grabbed from the dojo. The two both surged with Chachi. The spectral snakes surrounding Nadine transformed into harpoons and fired their spears at him. Damien closed his eyes. His neck hair stood up and tugged in a direction. He took one small step, feeling the rush as the first projectile went right past him. He felt it dance again, guiding him to follow suit in another direction, barely dodging another. He heard the sound of two of them firing at once. He stepped as best as he could, but one still managed to graze his arm. It was a superficial wound, but still stung. He opened his eyes to see Nadine sarcastically begin to clap. Well, well, she said. What a cute little ability you have. You pick out a name for it? Damien nodded. I call it Premonition Chachi. Just as I thought. Somehow you can sense Chachi and its corresponding attacks before they even happen. Impressive, but it doesn't give you much play on offense, does it? We'll see how long you can last before you run out of steam. Damien grimaced as she went back for another brew. He matched hers, but he knew his leaves were starting to run out of juice, and so was he. He was going to have to try to hold her off until Danielle and Marcus could come and back him up. Meanwhile, Marcus was backed into a corner, brewing tea as an onslaught of the ghostly apparitions attacked him. His chachi was running low as he was on his fourth brew of a tea, and more of them seemed to spawn by the minute. Each time they seemed to encroach closer and closer on his personal space, as he heard them louder and louder. You're not good enough. Look at you. You can't even brew your way out of this. Everyone can see how little you believe in yourself. Marcus gritted his teeth as he tried to concentrate on smelling for the peak. Shut up! Shut up! He poured out his brew, but this time the specters only got even closer. The door swung in as Danielle rushed into the dojo. She looked around. There were some spilled leaves on a table and a nearby tea bowl. She sprinkled them in and covered them in hot water as she channeled as much of her tea energy as she could into them. She took a sip and levitated the bowl over towards Marcus with all of her concentration. "Here, take this." Marcus pushed it away. "I don't need help from you." Danielle stared, mildly offended, but mostly annoyed. "What is that supposed to mean? You're engulfed in manifestations of your own worst fears. Just take the tea." Marcus shook his head. "I can stand up on my own. I don't need help from others. I certainly don't need to let others think that I need help either." The specters around him seemed to cackle in delight as they continued to advance on him and infiltrate his thoughts. Danielle clenched her fist, not knowing what else to do. Then a thought crossed her mind. A way to possibly get through to him. "Hey, maybe you don't need others, but others need you. Damien's up there fighting for his life and he could really use your help. So put your pride aside for a minute so we can go help him." "Damien?" Marcus said, seeming to break from his trance. The spirits seemed to be momentarily put at bay due to this thought. Danielle smiled to herself and thought, "I knew it. Those two are thick as thieves. They would do anything for each other. It's kind of a beautiful friendship, they..." Marcus interrupted the thought. "No, not Damien. He's my roommate, and he's a pretty good one at that. If he dies, I'll have to get another one. I don't know if this one will be as polite as Damien. This one might not even ask permission if he can have one of my toaster pastries. He might just eat them instead. I can't let something like that happen." Danielle's eyebrows raised as she watched Marcus drink deeply of the bowl. He surged with chachi and a determination to preserve his frosted breakfast pastries. He swung his fists through the ghost, releasing their grip on him as he trudged his way through and over to Danielle. He looked still a bit wary of accepting her help, and rather than thank her, just nodded respectfully. Danielle just sighed and rolled her eyes and started up the stairs. "Let's go. We gotta get back to Damien." Damien deftly sidestepped another round of projectiles. Dark throwing stars this time. He got a cut on his shoulder, his hip, and his hand. The worst matter was his chachi was running low, and the tea leaves were reaching the end of their lives. Nadine continued to look on him with sadistic pleasure as she readied herself for the next brew. Damien suddenly held out his hand in a stop gesture. "Wait!" "What is it?" she asked. He pulled out his notebook and started jotting something down. "I just remembered. Red tea is processed by allowing it to fully oxidize after withering. That's what gives it the more robust and deeper flavor compared to green teas and lightly oxidized oolongs." She stared at him a little incredulously. She simply poured her hot water over the leaves. Damien scowled and went back to brew his tea, but she snapped her fingers. Suddenly, his Gaiwan transformed into one of her specters and departed from him. "Enough of that," she said. "I've been enjoying humiliating you, but I think this has been dragging on for way too long. This is my illusion, after all. My reality. It's time I wiped your consciousness out for good." Marcus and Danielle ran over to Damien. They both quickly looked at his wounds and gasped. "Damien, are you all right?" Danielle asked. Marcus growled. "You'll pay for this, lady." She quietly cackled to herself. "I don't think I will. Now get ready." She brought her hand to her Gaiwan, ready to pour it out. The three of them all braced themselves, trying to prepare to dodge whatever spectral sharp objects she might launch in their direction this time. They were all momentarily distracted by something behind them. The air itself seemed to be splitting in two, right above them, as if an immense chachi was forcing its way into this world. They all stared up at it. Damien's hair, already raised from this, felt a twinge in the other direction. His eyes widened as he turned and saw a flurry of sharp sewing needles all flying towards Marcus's back. Without thinking, he leapt in front of the assault and bore it all himself. He held his arms to protect his face, but the sheer amount of them turned him immediately into a human pincushion. He let out a sharp gasp as they all pierced him, sticking into him. His body hurt all over, feeling each one with the intensity of 1,000 bee stings. He dared not remove them, unsure of how quickly he might start to bleed out from the chachi-enhanced weapons. He stumbled to the ground on his knees, barely able to hold himself upright. "Damien!" Marcus cried out, running over. "Why did you do that? Why did you throw yourself in front of her attack to protect me?" Damien let out a weak chuckle. "You say it like it was a choice." He coughed weakly, spilling some blood in the process. "I couldn't let that happen to you. I couldn't just let you die. You're my roommate. If you died, I'd have to get another one. And that one might not be so generous as to share his toaster pastries with me. I don't know how I'd go on living with a roommate like that." "Damien," Marcus said. Danielle just stared in disbelief. Her attention on the two roommates was broken, though, as the radiating tea energy finally pierced the veil of this illusory reality. For a moment, a tear through the reality formed, and through it, Rick jumped and landed on the ground in front of the trio. He wore khaki pants and a collared shirt, an outfit so common it could be considered his superhero costume. In this moment, he looked like one as he dusted himself off, stood up, and adjusted his glasses. He stared down Nadine with an intensity rarely seen out of the mild-mannered man. "Oh, Rick," she said. "How foolish of you to enter my illusion. Did you really think you could persuade me to stop attacking your latest crop of students?" "Nadine," he said, a low growl in his voice, "I came here to destroy you, plain and simple. People like you don't deserve persuasion and diplomacy." He drew a thermos from his back. Marcus eyed it carefully. It seemed to be radiating chachi. "What is that?" he thought. "I know some of them carry around hot water to brew anytime, anywhere, but it's almost like that's not just hot water in there." He picked up one of Damien's old cups off the ground. He unscrewed the lid of his thermos slightly and began to pour. Nadine quickly snapped her fingers. "Not so fast! This is my reality!" The spell fizzled. An invisible specter, who had attempted to consume Rick's thermos, burned up from the chachi emanating from it. Rick paused pouring to hold out the thermos and show it off in a bit more detail. Japanese characters adorned the thermos in gold print. They had not been visible previously. Nadine stared closely. On further inspection, it was like they held the thermos together. She stumbled backwards, nearly falling onto her behind. "No way!" she exclaimed. "You did kintsugi on a metal thermos? How's that even possible? How long must that have taken you?" Rick said. "What does it matter how long it took? You can't expect the executive director of the tea dojo to walk around with a thermos that can be hexed by any third-rate brewer." "Third-rate?" She slung one of her apparitions to carry the cups of tea over to the four of them. Rick poured a handful of cups. He handed his out to the three of them. Marcus tasted it. It was a delightful fruity and floral tea, with an inexplicable sweetness to it. It glimmered on his tongue and reminded him of being in nature, in complete serenity. The tea had notes of oranges and cloves. Despite being transported around in a thermos, it still had every bit of freshness. He pondered if it was a red tea. No, maybe an oolong. The more he thought about it, the more he was convinced that there must be something in between. But how could that be? He turned to see Danielle helping Damien to taste the tea. He stared in shock as Damien started to stand back up after, wounds sealing and healing as the pins were pushed from his body. Damien took another slurp of the tea. His whole soul and body healed from the incredible feeling of this tea, situated between two distinct flavors. The chachi had healed him. Nadine frowned. She launched a volley of cannonball-shaped specters right at Rick. He had not taken his eyes off her for a moment. He took a sip of his tea. In an instant, he disappeared. The projectiles completely missing their target and going nowhere. Nadine panicked, looking left and right to see how he disappeared. Even Danielle and Marcus had briefly lost sight of him. But Damien, who felt the tug of his neck hair, turned to see him right behind Nadine. Following his eyes, Nadine turned and jumped to see Rick with an arm outstretched, her cup of tea waiting for her. She took it and drank it. A feeling of elation from the blissful flavors only briefly blunted her feeling of despair as she realized how outclassed she was. She jumped backwards, pouring another round into her gaiwan desperately. She raised her hands up into the air, channeling all of her chachi as it surged wildly around her. "Illusory specters! Protect me!" Many ghosts appeared in front of her, in between Rick and herself. Rick stood unamused and indifferent. She was gasping for breath, but relieved she still had enough strength to call upon them. Danielle looked stressed, seeing the number that she was still able to conjure. Marcus seemed worried as well, but turned his attention to Damien. Damien's face looked perplexed as he studied the scene, as if there was something invisible that he could sense, but could not for the life of him understand. Nadine pointed her finger at Rick, silently commanding her army to charge him. To her surprise, they did nothing. Instead, they slowly turned their attention to her. They took on monstrous forms, unimaginable beasts with long claws and disturbing fangs. Rick just slowly walked towards the new dojo initiates as he left Nadine behind. No, what is this?" she asked. "This is my reality, my illusion. Why are they turning on me?" Rick clicked his tongue. "Calling you third-rate was too generous. Can't you tell? I think Damien has even picked up on it." Marcus turned to him. "What does he mean? What happened?" "It's his illusion now," he said. "The moment we drank his tea, we left Nadine's illusion chachi and entered his instead. He used the same exact technique that she used on us earlier, but it took hold even quicker." Rick said. "Exactly. It's interesting, right? Someone who's such a master of illusion chachi, who can't even notice when they've been swept into one that's not theirs. Doesn't really seem like much of a master to me. Every cup of tea is a story, but when you lose control of the pen, you no longer get to write the way it ends." Rick poured himself another cup of tea and drank it. He surged with a radiant aura and channeled all of it into his right hand. With that right hand, he plunged it into the very fabric of the illusory world and opened a gate back to reality, just as he had done to enter. He gestured for them to exit. Danielle and Damien did right away. Marcus paused for a moment. He looked back at Nadine, who was being engulfed by the specters as she screamed for help. What's going to happen to her? He asked. Rick looked at him. There seemed to be an almost incredulous disappointment in his eyes that this was even being asked. What do you think? He asked. It's the kind of fate that someone who steals power and knowledge from the Dojo and wields it for evil deserves. Come along now. Let this be a reminder to only use the power we teach you for good. Marcus nervously stepped through the portal and was followed by Rick, who sealed it shut after exiting. Marcus and Danielle woke up, both their heads on the table where they had fell asleep in the dojo. Everyone had departed at this point from the lecture except for them. Rick stood there, simply sipping on his tea. Marcus awoke staring at him on his right. With a bit of trepidation, he turned his head to his left to see Danielle stirring right next to him. He pushed his chair out and jumped away to put distance between the two of them. She frowned. What is wrong with you? Nothing. I don't have confidence issues. I think I'm good enough. Why would you say anything to the contrary? She just shook her head. Loud clomping footsteps came down the stairs to the basement where the Dojo was situated. Damien came charging through and into the room. Whew, he said. I just got carried by my lab partner so hard there. But what a crazy adventure that was. Rick, what was that tea you made? It was unlike anything I've ever had before. He smiled. I bet it was. This tea, when growing, is allowed to be attacked by insects, jacids, which bite the leaves and trigger the tea's defense mechanism. This increases the tea's level of oxidation, so that even though it's processed as an oolong, it still has plenty of notes that you would get from a red tea. That's incredible. I think this is my favorite tea of all time. What's it called? I bet it has an absolutely incredible name. Rick's smile waned. About that. So it's called Guifei cha, which roughly translates to, concubine tea? Damien's face fell immediately. Very funny, Rick. I didn't know you had a sense of humor. Come on, what's the actual name of the tea? Rick? Rick? Damien's face got more desperate the longer that Rick just stood there with his awkward half-smile. The tension was suddenly replaced with urgency as another entity came shambling down the steps and into the Dojo. Danielle felt goosebumps on her neck this time. This familiar feeling caused her to stare towards the door before whatever was approaching even got there. Oh no, not again! All the way out here! A rabid dog, as well as a stray rain cloud specifically localized to this area, appeared in the doorway. Damien and Marcus jumped backwards. Rick stared in confusion at the meteorologically impossible phenomenon before them. Danielle drew a kettle and a gaiwan, and then she grabbed a handful of tea leaves. Come on, it's time we settle this once and for all. You two aren't going to bother me anymore. Damien hopped up and grabbed some wares as well. I got your back. Let's take care of them. Come on, Marcus, you too. She helped us back there in the illusion. Now it's time we pay her back. Marcus shrugged and reluctantly grabbed a gaiwan. I had it under control, but fine. We'll beat up this storm cloud for her. Rick stared in confusion as the three of them clashed. He sipped some tea to try to determine if he was still in some kind of illusion, but it appeared not. This was just the reality they were in. One that was stranger than fiction. Thank you so much for listening to this chapter of Dojo at Football State. If you enjoyed, please rate the podcast, give it a like on YouTube, or share with someone else you think might also enjoy. You can stay up to date with Dojo at Football State by following us on social media. That'll be D2 Stories on just about any of the major platforms. If you prefer reading to listening stories, also follow us on Substack, also D2 Stories. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to have you listen again next week.